fun animation from the studio of Bambi getting crushed by Godzilla's foot.
Screw the people in the future.
This is where Godzilla starts transitioning. When we were all little kids, we grabbed our action figures and just smashed them together.
The gore is the point, my man.
Hello, everybody! First Radio Mythoverse of 2024, and as always, your hosts are Brett McGowan, writer-creator of Changeling and Urban Fairy Tale, head of community outreach and public relations, and one of the owners of the Mythoverse. And with me, my co-host, our co-owner, my partner, writer-creator of Mythics, and our head writer is Metrin.
Hey, guys.
And sitting in with us, two of our other Mythoverse talents. Say hi to Duskwill and Sauron. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
How's it going?
So, to kind of start off the new year, at the time we're recording this, well, the hype around Godzilla Minus One, the latest Godzilla movie from Toho, has been nothing short of massive. I don't think that's up for debate.
That's putting it lightly. If we think about all movies that have ever been released, American or otherwise, how many movies have done multiple back-to-back theatrical releases? Like, they release, then they released again, then they release a different version, then they release again to even more theaters. It just keeps snowballing.
I know there was a thing floating around where it's like budget was 15 million. I think it was on Twitter where the director even said like he wishes the budget was that high. So this movie probably made more money than a lot of people are actually giving it credit for.
Just out of curiosity, I'm going to look this up.
I just looked at the box office earnings, and according to Google, it's currently sitting at $85.8 million in the box office.
IMDb has it at 95 million worldwide, at least.
According to Wikipedia, it has grossed over 96 million so far.
This thing is keeps going up.
Yeah, this thing is on track to really earn back its budget and then some. Like I said, the hype for this has been huge. So with it still being relevant in the current pop culture landscape for the time being, and us all being Godzilla fans to one degree or another, I thought to myself, why don't we just do a little series of episodes where we just talk about Godzilla movies, talk about our history, what we like, what we don't like so much, and kind of what we all think about out of it now. Because there's so many movies, and honestly, the thing about this is you literally can break the Godzilla series up by eras.
Oh yeah, and each individual era focus on like a different, not so much a storyline, but like different, I want to say, genre that you could typically find in the kaiju / giant monster type of movies.
Yeah, I would say that there's like a design philosophy behind each era to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. So as this is the first episode, this is going to focus mainly on the Showa era, but I think before we go any further, we should at least clear the air on what our individual origin stories are. Since Dusk and Sauron are sitting in, guests always get speaking privileges first, so which one of you guys wants to go first?
I'll let Dusk go because I could go on for a minute.
All right, Dusk, you're first.
I actually grew up with a lot of Godzilla. I wouldn't say it was the first 5 movies I've watched, but definitely was within the first 10 movies I've ever watched since I was a kid. And even now, I still haven't seen every Godzilla, but I have definitely watched quite a lot of them. I also grew up playing a lot of the video games, especially
the Pipeworks trilogy.
I believe Destroy All Monsters Melee. That was like my first game on the Xbox. And then right before PS3 got released, I still never owned a PS3. The first I went down PlayStation was PS2. But before PS3 got released, they released Defend the Earth or something.
Save the Earth.
Yeah, Save the Earth. I got that one for the PS2 and played that one extensively. And you just took what Destroy All Monsters had and just made it like better, though I wish quite a lot of features they had planned for that game. Managed to get in, but they didn't really get everything they wanted in there. I haven't played many other of the games outside of those two, though.
Yeah, there was Unleashed, which was the last one, and that one had the most mixed reception because they decided to focus on the Wii.
It was definitely a backpedal.
It really was.
The Wii was not the best console if you were making a fighting game.
Mm-hmm. As far as the movies go, I've watched quite a lot of them. I definitely do remember watching the one where they had Biological Biollante. I watched pretty much all the Mechagodzilla ones. I've seen Mothra versus Godzilla. Even though it's not really a Godzilla movie, I did see the Rodan movie. I saw the versus Megalon. Both of the King Ghidorahs and the Mecha King Ghidorah one I've seen. I think I saw Hidora.
It might be easier just to list off the ones you haven't seen.
Potentially, but the problem is it's been so long since I've had to think about all the Godzilla movies I saw. I even saw the original versus Kong movie way back in the day. Way later down the line, I actually watched the original Godzilla movie. That one was pretty good. It was movies like that, and I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it was the one where Anguirus wasn't introduced, but it was the first time Anguirus was considered Godzilla's friend. I believe it's the one that had the little fun animation from the studio of Bambi getting crushed by Godzilla's foot. That was kind of funny.
Oh, I don't remember which one. I know what you're referring to, though, but I don't know which one it was.
I think the one you're thinking of is Gigan.
Maybe. I watched the 1998 or 2000s American Godzilla, which wasn't really even a Godzilla movie. And then the Monsterverse start coming out. And I was seeing that, I could definitely say without doubt that the American Godzillas really can't do the human drama that the Japanese can do, but they really up the ante when it does come to monsters and fighting chicanery. And I'm kind of curious to see how this new Monsterverse Godzilla, New Empire, Fallen Empire, or something like that. I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to go with the new Godzilla design. Talked a couple of times with the lead designer for the pink Godzilla design. He's a pretty cool guy. I enjoy seeing him on Twitter. But I'm also kind of curious because it seems like this might be the time the Americans can actually do the human drama in a Godzilla movie. It seems interesting at the very least. A couple years back, I saw Shin Godzilla when that came out. I have still yet to actually watch Minus One. I'm waiting to find it in a store or something because I just don't really enjoy theaters all that much. That's about as far as my experience with Godzilla is, but I would like to consider myself not a huge fan, but a very good fan. I do love Godzilla and just wish I've watched more stuff.
Okay, Sauron, you've now got the mic.
Oh, man. I've made a joke before to many times where when other people were growing up, they were watching Disney movies. I was watching horror movies and Godzilla. I remember one of the first times was back when Sci-Fi Channel was actually Sci-Fi and not Sci-Fi or whatever they call themselves now. Every Sunday morning or something like that, they would play one of the old Godzilla movies. In hindsight, it was the Heisei movies mostly, but they would show any movie. It wasn't in any particular order. And I remember watching them. And at the time, I was a kid. I didn't understand the concept of places outside of where I lived, let alone other countries. I just saw a big lizard blowing up shit, and I was like the coolest thing possible. It was either the 98 Godzilla or Godzilla 2000 that I saw in theaters for the first time. It's one or the other because I know they both technically came out around the same time, and I would have been at the age to where I definitely would remember wholly which was which. But either way, I love both of them in their own context. My opinions have changed over the years for each movie. For the most part, I've watched all of those growing up. I haven't seen every single Godzilla movie. I've seen some of the noteworthy ones, like the original, a couple of Showa era ones. I've probably seen all of the Heisei ones at least at one point or another in my life. I've seen the 98, obviously. I've seen the 2000, not all Millenniums, probably most of them, honestly. And then with the new ones since then, I've kind of just watched all of them at some point in time. Godzilla vs. Kong was the first movie I saw back when theaters first opened back up after COVID. And since then, I haven't been to a theater. I literally have not been to a movie theater since then until Minus One. Because I think I even told someone, I'm not going back to a theater unless it's a movie I really want to see. There is no doubt in my mind I want to see it. And sure enough, it came out right after Christmas, right after New Year's. And there was a theater in my town that was showing it, and me and my buddy went. And there was actually quite a few people in there. It wasn't like a whole bunch of people. It was a smaller theater. For a small theater, the seats were actually pretty full for it. So it kind of made me happy to see that this movie was still getting that many people to come see it, even though it had well past its opening. I like the Monsterverse stuff. I don't hate it. I've said many times, to me, there's two types of Godzilla movies. There's the serious ones, which is like the foundation of what the movie was born on with that original 50s. And then you have the Saturday morning cartoon ones. To me, the Monsterverse is the Saturday morning cartoon ones, and Minus One is the super serious one. I won't say one is better than the other, because I do think they both have their own place. But after what I would say years of getting the Saturday morning cartoon ones, it's nice to get another addition into that serious, this is technically what what the movies were founded on kind of film.
Okay, so Matt, your turn.
Well, I didn't have as much of a background in Godzilla movies as any of you, but I remember watching them back when they were on Sci-Fi Channel. The Godzilla movies, the ones with Mothra, and even the MST3K episodes.
Oh yeah, well, those will come up later.
You can't watch them anymore because if they sell them, they get sued.
I forgot about some of those cartoons.
And I've seen the Crow T Robot remake of Godzilla called Goshzilla.
Yeah, we are definitely showing you guys that later.
Well, according to him, it made more of a profit than the 97 movie.
You guys are all in for a treat later in this episode. Trust me. Okay, so as far as my history goes with it, I was about 6 years old. There was a neighbor kid, lived next door. He basically was the one who introduced me and my brother to it. And the first Godzilla movie, I still remember, much to my shame, but the first one we saw was Godzilla 1985, which is, it's a movie, all right. Let me put it this way, if this thing basically vindicates everything anti-localizers say.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, I had to think about it. 'Cause that's not even the real name of that movie, if I remember correctly.
It's not.
Nah.
Let me put it this way. I did not get the best introduction to Godzilla out of the gate, but the seed got planted and it never left. And I think the first one my brother and I ever owned, our dad bought us Godzilla versus Megalon on VHS. Yes. I did not start out with any of the good ones.
What are you
That's
talking
what I
about?
was gonna
Godzilla
say,
versus
dude.
Megalon is like peak cinema. The drop kick.
That
I
was
was about to say the fucking drop kick.
That was the first one we owned, and then as we got older, Blockbuster in the city we were living in and happened to have a whole bunch of Godzilla movies, and we just kept renting them, seeing them, and then we eventually got some of the Heisei movies that were on DVD that were packaged as double features.
Oh, the sad thing about those is that you can't find those, you can find them, but they're all resold. They're not brand new.
They're years old by this point.
Yeah.
We just kept watching them. I mean, like, we were little kids. We just ate this up, just watching rubber suit monsters beat the snot out of each other. This was enough to occupy my 10-year-old brain for an hour or two.
There's something almost primal about seeing giant monsters smack each other around. Like, I don't trust someone who says they looked at that and hated it. Not like thought it was dumb. I'm talking about like just hated it. Like, I don't trust you if you looked at a Godzilla movie, saw two, like not even two giant monsters, just giant monster tearing up stuff, and you were like, I hate this. I'm never watching this again.
But you feel the same way about people who say that about Power Rangers.
Yeah. It's like, this
Yeah.
is dumb. That's the point. That's kind of the point. This is dumb. Oh,
And then there's Kamen Rider, but let's not get into a tangent.
oh man.
Imagine hating a whole subgenre of superhero movies while we just went through a whole era of nothing but superhero movies.
Honestly, I always kind of forget that. It's weird because I'm well aware of it. At the same time, I never think of it as that. Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, Power Rangers, those are superheroes. That is superhero genre 101.
They literally are.
The entirety of the tokusatsu genre and Sentai genre and even the magical girl genre to an extent is ripped from superheroes.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always talked about. I'm the Godzilla nerd who I won't say will research it unless there's an opportunity to do so. It's not like I go out of my way in my free time to do it, but I've done classes where we talk about world cinema and I've used that as an excuse to research Godzilla. One thing I've always found interesting is I don't think some people truly understand, and this isn't one of those America above all kind of moments, but I do think there is an element of Western influence on Godzilla, and not just in the whole, oh, in the original, he was born from nuclear weapons testing is done by America. No, I'm talking about like, I don't think Godzilla would ever be as popular as he is today, if it wasn't for America latching onto him the way they did.
We can get into this more when we talk about the first movie, but it was kind of inspired by King Kong and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, both of which were huge and still are to this
Mhm.
day.
Yeah, not to mention, keep in mind, the original Godzilla movie, it's not called Godzilla, it's called Gojira. Godzilla was the name they gave him when he was adapted in the West, which is what we talked about earlier, where they added that whole context of like the extra character. It's like they also changed the name. It's where Godzilla, King of the Monsters comes from. And I think it's very telling that ever since then, that's the name even the Japanese have given him. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. They call him Gojira from time to time.
Even in the Monsterverse, those more the Asian descent call him Kojira mostly, while the more European and westernized characters call him Godzilla. There's a lot of back
Yeah.
and forth
I
between the two
think
names.
even Toho's more or less accepted Godzilla as the English translation for Gojira.
I mean, let's be perfectly clear. They own the rights to both
Yeah,
names.
they do.
So I'm sure to them, it's
And-
like, oh, we don't care what you call him.
And the one thing I find fascinating, because I'm a bit of a culture culture nerd myself, Godzilla as a concept and as a franchise sort of joins alongside the samurai versus cowboy cinema when it comes to representing that while yes, every nation in the world with their arts and cross-pollination do have some aspects of that, but I think specifically Godzilla along with the samurai and cowboy films shows that specifically America and Japan have like a very special relationship when it comes to cultural cross-pollination. And it's very fascinating to see a visual representation of that like you see with Godzilla.
It's a side tangent, but it's like with baseball, where baseball is an American sport. It came from America. It is like undoubtedly from America. Yet it is just so popular in Japan to the point where it is ingrained into their culture just as much as like America. I know there's even a thing where some Japanese people don't realize it's from America. It's just two coexisting sports. It's like, no, it came from American GIs who were stationed there post World War II. Two very different cultures have influenced one another. And I don't think a lot of people realize it as such.
Yeah, from classic cartoons and anime with Godzilla, with baseball, and again with cowboy films and samurai films. Like cowboys came first, then the samurai films came in using the cowboys. Then the cowboys made a resurgence using influence from the samurai movies, and it just keeps going back and forth like that. Even to this day, I think there's still not as much as they used to be, but I think even now there's still cowboy and samurai films or even shows and movies that are using inspiration from the cowboy and samurai films.
This is another side tangent, but I would love to see a movie. I don't know if it already exists, but I would love to see a movie where it's a cowboy and a samurai fighting side by side against. I don't know what they're fighting
Yeah,
side
there
by
is.
side
There
against.
is. Yes,
There is.
Matt, say it.
I don't remember the name, but it has Toshio, Mifune, and Charles Bronson.
Oh,
I'm pulling that up
I
right
need to-
now. I know what he's talking about.
as I need to know that. Again, I'm sure it existed. I would like to see more of it if possible, because it's just
Red
like,
Sun. That's the name of the movie.
oh,
Red
Red
Sun.
Sun, just like fucking Metal Gear Rising.
To be fair, the character you're specifically talking about, Sundowner, he is literally an Alabama-born man that is so war-heavy that he actually takes on a lot of Japanese iconography for their World War II and before military complex empires, and just became a massive fucking weeaboo because of it. He's got a whole 3 to 5 floors just shelled out and empty just so he can have a Japanese garden in his freaking main HQ building. It's hilarious.
All right, let's get on to the real subject. Since we're breaking this up by era, we'll start with the Showa era, which is from the first Godzilla movie in 1954 all the way to the mid-70s. That's what's considered the Showa era.
Yeah, it starts with the original Gojira, and then it ends with Terror of Mechagodzilla, which is 1975.
So it's kind of hard to have an original take on the original Gojira at this point. This movie's been around for so long, everything that can be said about it has been said.
One thing I will say is that original film, I will still stand as probably the best. As much as I love the goofy ones, as much as I love some of the newer ones, I still say that one, even with it being from the 50s, still holds up very well for what it is. Because even with the suits and the miniatures, you know it's a miniature, you know it's a suit, you know it's not real, but the way it is shot, they do their best to make it part of the world. And I think in terms of a filmmaking standpoint, it is probably up there as one of the best films ever made.
And I think it really helps that, for the most part, they really subdued Godzilla's actual presence. You don't really see a whole lot of Godzilla himself in the movie. You just see little snippets and bits and pieces of him until the money shot happened. But despite his minimum appearance in the movie, everything about him, the consequences of him being there, just looms over the entire movie and is present at all times. It really sells the dread and horror of Godzilla and essentially what he stands for, which is the usage of nuclear weapons and the damage it causes in the instant and afterwards.
I think what's kind of interesting is contrasting this against American sci-fi movies, which had similar messaging, but they came from a different perspective. At the time when American movies did like a nuclear allegory, the idea was this needed to be in the hands of the U.S. military or the U.S. government because those were hands you could trust. Yes. Yeah, we know. Yes. We know how that's aged. We have the benefit of hindsight, but if you take a movie like Forbidden Planet, the message is power like this needs to be placed in the right hands, and those hands happen to be the military.
Yeah, while the Japanese is more like no one should have this kind of power. No one man should have all that power.
That's the Kanye song.
To be fair, even to this day, Japan remains to be the only people to have ever officially be hit with a nuclear attack. They're the only ones with this unique perspective as being victims of a nuclear strike.
In fact, if you talk to people who've been to the Hiroshima Memorial, they talk about it as there's this very haunting presence being there. The sense is similar to being on hallowed ground.
Yeah, I've been there. It's in the middle of a populated area. It's not on its own, but it feels very somber. If anything, it's like everyone who's there kind of knows not to be rowdy or disrespectful.
The closest I think Americans could understand something like that is being at the Ground Zero Memorial in New York. There's just this atmosphere of soberness and this very heavy feeling that looms over you.
Yeah. One thing I will say, because even in the original Godzilla movie, which spoilers for what is like almost a century-year-old movie, but the original Dr. Serizawa in that movie, there's a whole plot point where he's developed a weapon that is arguably worse than the atomic bomb.
Oh.
Oxygen destroyer.
Yeah.
And that's what they use to defeat that Godzilla. But he doesn't want to use it, not because he doesn't want to stop Godzilla. It's not like he doesn't recognize the threat he poses, but he doesn't want another devastating weapon to be added to the world. And what he ends up doing is when there needs to be someone to go down to Godzilla's lair to set off the bomb, he chooses to go do it and kills himself with Godzilla.
That way there's no one left that knows how to make another one.
Exactly. In the Japanese perspective, it's like no one should have this power. That permeates throughout the entire film. No one should have that power to just press a button and kill so many people. Even with the fictional weapon, it permeates throughout that entire movie. And I do think as the series has gone on, that metaphor has kind of faded away. Part of me thinks the metaphor faded away just because
Passage of time,
nuclear has become ingrained in a lot of parts of the world. It'd be like trying to tell people not to burn fossil fuels. We're well past that point. No one's listening.
Yeah, nuclear power, like it or not, it's stuck around despite certain activist groups' best attempts. And I mean, like, this isn't even a hot take. It's actually been proven to be pretty safe when it's done correctly, of course.
It's not held together by duct tape and prayers.
Yes.
Yeah, like as a weapon, it's devastating. But when it's not used as a weapon, it's kind of poetic, in my opinion. Because to me, when you follow Godzilla movies as they go on, timeline-wise and real world, you see that kind of reflect. Here's this thing that's beyond.
With Godzilla becoming less and less of a threat or a enemy of mankind, become more and more of a defender or a balancer, the better of two options at a moment.
Yeah, because even there's some of the newer ones, because a lot of that stuff, what you talked about, comes from the more Saturday morning cartoon vibes of Godzilla, where it's treated more as an ally or what's the word?
A lesser of two evils.
Yeah, a lesser of two evils. However, I will say even with the newer ones that still present him as this monstrous threat, it's still not really to the same degree as the original where no one should have this power. It's more like this power is here. How do we conquer it?
I think less conquering, more just how do we live with it?
Well,
how
yeah,
do we live around it?
To me, I would say conquering it and living with it. Not necessarily the same thing, but I do think they go hand in hand.
I think that's a nice segue into the sequel. And this thing was cranked out in less than a year.
Raids again.
Yeah, Godzilla raids again. And yeah, this thing was a rush job and it shows in a lot of places. But to its credit, it knows it can't pull off the same move twice. They were wise to that.
And also basically introduced one of the greatest bromances in all of cinema.
Anguirus.
Yeah, Godzilla raids again. This is the first time Godzilla fights another monster, which, as we all know, ends up becoming a staple of the franchise. What this one tries for is, instead of being an allegory about nuclear weapons, it tries to be an allegory about war. Because in the aftermath of the war, saying Japan had an uphill battle when it came to reconstruction is putting it lightly. There was kind of this Japanese sense of endure the unendurable, and that's kind of what it tries to be about. Godzilla and Anguirus' war devastates Osaka, and everyone's left to pick up the pieces. The problem is, due to the rushed nature of this movie, that metaphor ends up getting lost. It's not given the time to properly develop the same way it was in the first movie.
It was definitely one of the first cases of Godzilla movies kind of forsaking the story for the monster brawling spectacle.
Yes and no.
Yeah, because they've been looking at some of its production. Again, it came out a year after. So I'm sure a lot of that was, we need a follow-up to this. We need to make more of this. Because even director-wise, the original one has Ishiro Honda as the director, but then this one has Ishiro Honda and then another guy.
Oda, Motoyoshi
Oda,
Oda.
yeah.
Yes, and really to kind of put in perspective what this guy was coming from, he was part of a Japanese film community that didn't just include Ishiro Honda, it also included Akira Kurosawa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In fact, actually, the guy who mentored both Honda and Kurosawa said that they represent the two types of people who come from Kohaku. Or was it Tohaku? I can't remember. You have Kurosawa, who challenges the natural order, and Honda, who tries to fit himself into it.
Also, I will say it's actually interesting that looking at these movies, the original director, Honda, he directed quite a few of these early movies in the Showa era.
He did. In fact, to bring it back to the first movie, part of what made that movie so special was that Honda really emphasized the humanity of the picture. These were not just people that were meant to give a POV to all the carnage. These were actual people. These were people we had names and faces for. These were people whose lives we knew. That's why that movie hit so hard, because it's not just a monster going on a rampage through the city like, say, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. This is a destructive force of nature upending the lives of people.
We still have to recognize that the original Godzilla, I don't think they really meant to start a new genre of filmmaking. Initially, the original Godzilla or Gojira was supposed to be a tragic disaster film that just so happened to personify the tragedy as a giant rampaging monster.
Every movie post that first movie, because there's been a few movies, not even just counting Godzilla Raids Again, the start of a new one almost always presents itself as a sequel to the 50s movie, because the original movie ends in such a way where it would be kind of insulting to just be like, oh, somehow Godzilla survived the bomb or survived the oxygen destroyer. But there's a few movies that try to be direct sequels to that original movie. Raids Again, I think theoretically all the other ones too, because they always present themselves as the second Godzilla that emerged rather than the original. Then you have the Millennium series, which I think the Heisei does it too, where they kind of imply it's a second Godzilla, not the original. But I know in the Millennium one, they directly refer to it as a second Godzilla.
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that after the first Godzilla movie came out, it just went as an unspoken rule that Godzilla is essentially a creature or a mythological thing to Japanese culture now, where everyone knows what it is. The only time Godzilla was ever truly a mystery is whenever the American movies start going into Godzilla, or the new special cases, the two recent Japanese ones, Shin Godzilla Minus One, where Godzilla is an unknown creature. But even then, in the American Monsterverse, the Monsterverse, not the 2000 American Godzilla, but the Monsterverse, while everyone else still have no idea who Godzilla is, still the Japanese people have an idea of who Godzilla is from tales told through the centuries down the generations.
Even in the 98 movie, say what you will about that movie, because I do think it's a bad adaptation of Godzilla rather than anything else.
I'd say it's an alright giant monster movie. It was just a terrible Godzilla movie.
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of the consensus for that movie. Yeah, it's not really a good Godzilla movie, but in terms of giant monster movies, it's fun. One thing I will say, though, is that even that movie has a slight hint of Godzilla being this mythological thing, because there's that scene where the French guy is interrogating the fisherman. There's that shot where he's just like, Gojira. To me, that's what that scene is trying to imply. Is not that he's been around for a long time, but just that he is this thing in the world that some people are aware of and fear as almost like a deity.
Yeah. Oh, and Forster just hopped in. How you doing?
Hey, Forrester.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Probably won't be here very long, but I did want to comment on it because Minus One is the first movie I've bought a ticket to since The Dark Knight. It is the movie that got me back in the theater.
Yes.
Yo.
All right, so about Minus One.
Godzilla Minus One.
All right, but yeah, to sort of wrap up what I have to say about Godzilla Raids Again, it's shooting for the stars, but it's not hitting it. The rush nature of the production really shows, and the microcosm of just all that movie's shortcomings is in a key fight between Godzilla and Anguirus in Osaka. Now, Tsuburaya, Eiji Tsuburaya, the guy who did the special effects for the original and stayed on for most of the Showa era, the guy was very known for his attention to detail. He instructed one of his assistants, shoot this fight scene in slow motion. The reason why? Shooting it in slow motion helps give the monsters a sense of scale.
Oh.
Oh yeah, to make them feel weighty and gigantic.
Yes. The problem was the assistant misunderstood the instructions and shot the footage sped up. It is so bad. It is so fake. That takes you out of the movie more than the rubber suit does. Because
They're so fast and janky.
yeah.
Honestly, in thinking about that, I would say that's something a lot of Godzilla movies, even today, not all of them, but I think a lot of them miss the mark of understanding that these are giant creatures. Their movements would not be that fast. Like maybe from a perspective shot, like from the monster's point of view, maybe. But I don't think a lot of them really do that sense of scale as well as they probably should.
Yeah, to bring it back to the original, the suit actor they got, Haru Nakajima, guy who's an absolute legend in the Godzilla community. To prepare for the role, he studied large animals at a Tokyo zoo, like elephants. He watched how they moved to get an idea of how Godzilla might move. And the fact that the suit was so heavy and cumbersome also contributed to that.
That is one thing that is definitely interesting, though, is baby's first Godzilla fun fact type of thing. But when the rubber suits were still being in use, outside of like one case, maybe, not a single rubber suit has been used for another movie. Every movie has had a different rubber suit.
Up until the Heisei era, where they figured out materials that could last between movies. But yes, you were correct in that. The problem was that these suits would just rot in storage very quickly. They were just unusable, so it was just cheaper to make a new suit.
Oh, that's a common thing with older stuff. They built things to be used, not really to preserve, which is why a lot of media from that era is sometimes hard to come by because they didn't make it in the idea of, oh, well, what if someone 20 years from now wants to see this? They weren't thinking of that. They were like,
Lack of foresight.
yeah, we'll make it now. People will enjoy it now. And I'd like to say, screw the people in the future, but this wasn't in their mind.
It was a lack of foresight.
Yeah.
That's not nearly as bad as how BBC handled some of classic Doctor Who. There was a time when they used to light whole film reels on fire in a giant bonfire just to clear storage space. And so whole episodes and storylines from the classic Doctor Who have been completely lost.
Always sad. Because even like with Godzilla, was it you have the Crichton collection that came out?
Criterion, yeah.
Yeah, where they have the entire Showa era saved on there. It's more of an archival thing at that point where you have these movies that you literally couldn't find anywhere else. And it's actually a good thing that they're saved in such a format because that way there's always a record of it.
So after Raids Again, if Raids Again started the formula, King Kong vs. Godzilla is the movie that established what Godzilla was going to be.
Raids Again, to me, is an example of why you shouldn't listen to the critics. It was better received in the contemporary newspaper reviewers than the first one, and that's completely backwards. But their idea was that monster movies shouldn't be serious. Trying to make the first one serious came off to them as stupid. It's kind of like how Batman 66... For some reason, the camp approach in those 50s, 60s days was considered what that stuff was supposed to be. If you tried to be serious, it was just weird. And they're wrong. First one was by far the better film, but...
Yeah, well, like I said, if Raids Again started the formula, King Kong vs. Godzilla firmly established it. This is what it was going to be. Just a kaiju wrestling match. And this is kind of where we get the introduction to someone who became synonymous with the Showa era of kaiju movies, and that is screenwriter Kenichi Sekizawa. Sekizawa's history is actually interesting. He was drafted into the Japanese army during World War II, but unfortunately for him, he was stationed on a hot, humid island in the middle of nowhere where he was just miserable the entire time. Yeah, he just had an awful time during his deployment, and once he got back from the war, he kind of realized, holy shit, I survived. And he came away with this perspective of, you know what? I survived, and now I want to enjoy all the life I've got left. And once he got picked up by Toho to start writing some of their monster movies, the first one he did was Varan. He kind of decided to take things in a different direction because he felt like the plots were becoming too predictable.
Yeah, I don't care what anybody says. One thing a lot of those monster slugfest movies do is usually give you a plot where, yeah, you know the monster's going to fight eventually, but there's usually some twists and turns here and there.
Yeah, well, like I said, like he felt like the plots were becoming too predictable, so he decided to flip the script on the kaiju genre. And this was in the 60s. This is back when that was cutting edge.
Because before, it was still only really Godzilla being the heavy hitter in the genre. What time did Gamera start kicking around?
I think like 1960. I don't know.
Yeah, that was still Showa era stuff. Because even Godzilla, to a degree, wasn't really that much of a heavy hitter. Definitely not to the point he is today.
Gamera debuted in 1965.
Like, you'll notice in King Kong versus Godzilla, King Kong is the one who got the top billing there.
Yeah.
Because King Kong was the much more well-known thing at that point.
Yeah, but another thing to also keep in mind is the movie that's considered Sekizawa's magnum opus is the first Mothra movie. Now, the movie before that was Rodan. Very good kaiju movie.
I really loved Rodan.
Very good kaiju movie, but still played to the formula. You have a monster, it goes on a rampage, humanity fights back. Sekizawa's idea with Mothra was to completely turn that on its head. Mothra is benevolent. Mothra is only going on a rampage because greedy humans stole her fairies, and once the humans give them back to her, she leaves. Not only that, he wanted to introduce more fun into it, and that's what he did with King Kong vs. Godzilla. He just had fun with it, and that shows.
The image of King Kong shoving a tree down Godzilla's throat forever lives rent-free in my head.
Yeah, that's one of those movies where anyone coming in there trying to take it seriously is setting themselves up for failure. Anyone who goes in there and is watching is like, this is dumb. And it's like, yeah, you're missing the point. It's supposed to be dumb.
Yeah.
Like, not dumb in the sense of stupid, but dumb as in dumb fun.
Yeah.
Turn your brain off and enjoy the spectacle.
In fact, the wrestling match analogy is very apt because even the suit actors based their movements off of professional wrestling. People probably don't need me telling them this, but professional wrestling is very popular in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they made it a bigger drama spectacle of it than we do.
We used to be really good at that, but that's another tangent.
Even, like I said earlier, it's almost primal for someone to see a giant monster and just enjoy it. To me, it's also very primal to see two giant monsters fighting each other. Neuron activated.
When we were all little kids, we grabbed our action figures and just smashed them together to make them fight.
Exactly. Not to mention, who doesn't sit there and think about crossovers of your favorite characters fighting each other? Even if it makes no sense for them to interact, you still sometimes think, oh, here's the Spider-Man action figure. Here's the Optimus Prime action figure. They're fighting for no reason. That's essentially what this is. It's the equivalent of someone took their gorilla action figure and someone took their dinosaur action figure and started mashing them together, saying like, who's going to win this throwdown?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's the same kind of energy of a little kid making his toys fight each other.
But it was in color. That helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first one in color. They were showing these on Svengoolie. That's a horror movie host in, I think, 2018, 2017. The first Godzilla and King Kong versus Godzilla. They got a lot of emails of people wanting to see those played again. Raids again, came and went. They have to show each movie they do on there twice in a year. There wasn't really anybody clamoring to see Raids again.
Because it's not a very good movie.
No, it's not. But Godzilla versus King Kong is not a very good movie, but it is a very fun movie. It fits very well into the, like silly host and skits and joking around with your friends. It's a good social movie because of its ridiculousness.
The fight sequences were definitely better in versus King Kong than it was with Raids Again.
Yeah. Like when you said wrestling, some movies are fun just to watch with other people and it's ridiculous, but everyone's having a good time. And that fits really well into the hosted movie genre. You know what I'm talking about, horror movie hosts. Svengoolie, he's like an Elvira type, cracks bad jokes in between sets and in between commercial breaks, people throw rubber chickens at him.
Yeah.
Nobody's seen Svengoolie?
No.
Somebody in our audience does because he's very popular. He's on MeTV, which is the rerun channel that pretty much everyone's town gets. Some of y'all's parents know what I'm talking about. Anyways, yeah. So I was just saying that
One
was
thing
the
I'll say
reception.
though, if someone was sat down to watch Godzilla or King Kong versus Godzilla and started complaining about how dumb it was, you're probably someone who hates fun. Just sit back and enjoy it. Just stop. Just enjoy the dumb.
You're the fun one at the party.
You're Roger Ebert complaining about The Thing, saying like, "Oh, this is too gory. What's the point? The gore is the point, my man."
Yeah, but it lends itself to fun complaining. Some movies are just fun to make fun of. Batman and Robin with riff tracks. It's literally fun to poke fun at that movie. Other sorts of movies are just boring. That's what I think Raids Again was. I watched it. That's about it. I don't remember what even happened in it.
All right, so after King Kong versus Godzilla, then we get Mothra versus Godzilla.
Which is another crossover.
Yeah, it's still Sekizawa writing it. Not as fun as King Kong versus Godzilla. It's actually a little darker.
Well, to be fair, Honda came back to direct for that one.
He was even back in King Kong versus Godzilla, I think.
Isn't this one like Godzilla's the villain? Wholeheartedly the villain.
Oh yeah, Mothra is the guardian deity of humanity or something like that.
Yeah, but it also recycles some of the plot lines from the original Mothra. You got an evil businessman who's at least the human face for villainy, but then you've also got Godzilla. It's still good. It's just not as fun as King Kong versus Godzilla.
This goes back into the whole debate as to what is a proper Godzilla movie. Is it dumb or is it serious?
I gave this some thought on a drive home from work once, and I kind of realized that Godzilla is whatever the movie needs him to be.
Oh, yeah.
He's an enigmatic figure that can be a stand for pretty much anything you need him to be. And he'll more likely than not be a perfect fit for the messaging you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it might also be one of the few Godzilla movies, at least from this era, where he actually loses.
Isn't this also the case of Raids Again? Because I don't think after Raids Again, Godzilla and Anguirus ever fought each other, and after Mothra vs. Godzilla, I don't think Mothra and Godzilla ever fought again. I think at that point on, those three just became forever allies, or at least they just tolerated each other.
I think, especially with Mothra, because Mothra was never meant to be a bad guy kind of monster, a malevolent force. Because obviously they didn't want Godzilla to be that evil, especially as time went on. Obviously, if you're going to do that, you can't have him keep fighting what is objectively supposed to be a good guy. And I think that's also why, not to spoil it, because we're about to start talking about it, but I think that's why the next movie is what it is.
Yep, this is Ghidorah the three-headed monster. This is where Godzilla starts transitioning to his more heroic persona, which will stick through pretty much all of the Showa era.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think it's also around this time the idea of aliens started to get introduced to Godzilla as well.
Yeah,
Which one is the one where he talks? The fairies, he translate.
That's Ghidorah.
I think it's
That's what I
this
thought.
one because if I remember right, he, Rodan, and Mothra actually talk to each other to go up against Ghidorah.
Up to this point, was Godzilla ever confirmed to be like eye level sentient?
I don't know. Up to this point, they just portrayed him as a rampaging monster. Whether or not he was intelligent was kind of an afterthought. He was just
It
supposed
just
to be
had a bit more of a
destructive.
primal intelligence.
I would even argue the fact that they start using tools alone is a sign of higher intelligence to a degree. He's using tools, he's learning.
This is around the time where Godzilla and Mothra actually start solidifying their alliance together for the rest of the franchise, but also keeps the tradition of Godzilla continuously having crossovers, because this is also when Rodan from the Rodan movie fame officially joins the Japanese Monsterverse canon as a lineup of Godzilla frenemies.
I remember someone on YouTube referred to Rodan as pretty much the wild card of Godzilla.
He's the Starscream.
So he's basically a Starscream. It's like a flip if he's a friend or an ally at any given point. A friend or an enemy, rather.
I think some of the nuances added to it are kind of by accident, because even with the King Ghidorah stuff, and it might also be part of the second movie as well, because I know he appears in the movie after this. I'm just going to confer to them as the same, because I don't remember which one comes from what. But it's implied that King Ghidorah is not a giant monster. He is like a legit alien that goes around conquering and destroying worlds. He had wiped out another planet, which is why the plot even starts. Because we're talking about with Godzilla, if he has higher sentience. Beforehand, you could probably argue if he did or didn't, but with this one, he's literally fighting something that has higher sentience. Therefore, he kind of has to have higher sentience as well. I guess have to isn't the right word, but it kind of would make sense.
He's showing intelligence.
Yeah, because his enemy is showing that level of intelligence.
Yeah, and this also was the movie that kickstarted the recurring rivalry between Godzilla and King Ghidorah, which is about as iconic as the one between, like, say, Optimus Prime and Megatron, or Batman and the Joker.
Yeah, I think to this day, King Ghidorah is probably the most reoccurring monster in the Godzilla movies.
He is one of five. There's Toho's Big Five, which is Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla. They have been present in every era of Godzilla.
I just think that the dichotomy between Godzilla and Ghidorah really helped cement Ghidorah as Godzilla's archenemy, because before, Godzilla was mostly just a destructive force that could occasionally do the good deed, not out of the kindness of its own heart, but more just because he didn't like competition. But when Ghidorah comes in, he's essentially the big bad intergalactic universal destroyer. All he does is just destroy. And in that way, I think Ghidorah made Godzilla what he is now, which is overall, no matter what other minor events he does, his overall goal is just protecting the Earth. And I think just how they designed Ghidorah pretty much made it obvious and inevitable that Godzilla would be in that slot for the rest of the franchise.
Well, yeah, because we talked about earlier, it was like the lesser of the two evils. It's kind of dumb to think about it in such a way, but as much as Godzilla made this like humans, the Earth is still his home. And it's like, if anyone's going to tear up the Earth, it's going to be me, not you. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think it just comes with the fact that they introduce what is objectively just an evil entity. Therefore, unless your hero is just as evil, obviously there's going to be a lesser of the two evils regardless, especially since one is such an alien force. I'm a personal lover of hero of circumstance kind of moment rather than just is a hero.
The Paragon hero.
The reluctant hero.
Yeah, reluctant hero. And I think this movie is what cemented that, especially for Godzilla. Because even in a lot of the expanded media, like the games, they usually treat it as that. When you think about it, Ghidorah is essentially Galactus. He's Unicron. He's this evil force that goes around destroying planets, and there's no sympathizing with him. You just have to destroy him.
His only goal, his only desire, his only thing is just destroying everything in sight, one at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the only reason Godzilla and Rodan even fight him is because they just don't like him. Neither one of them like humans.
If anything, Rodan will probably have even more reason I care about humans, considering that Rodan's lover, I think, his mates got killed by human intervention.
Yeah, and Godzilla and Rodan definitely don't like each other because the first thing they do when they first meet each other in that movie is they try to fight each other. But it's a case where I don't like you, but I hate him even more.
This is well ahead of when we'll talk about it, but I will just say in the side tangent, I think it's what King of the Monsters 2019 one does really well is emphasizing that I don't care how you feel about these other monsters. Ghidorah is just evil. There's no other way around it. He's evil. So anyone fighting him is automatically the good guy. And I think that movie does that very well.
Just as a blanket statement across the Showa era, a lot of these effects are going to look very dated by today's standards, but you know what? They're still good for what they are. Really should not hold poorly aged effects against a movie.
I will say, if you're someone who watches an old movie and complains about it looking old, you don't deserve rights to speak. I'm sorry. It's such a silly thing to me. It's like, oh, why does this movie have bad CGI? I don't know. Maybe because CGI was barely a thing at the time. God, like have some self-awareness of the world around you, my man.
Some ways it becomes more enjoyable because it's not just, wow, that looks good, but how on earth did they do that back then?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Hi, guys, it's Brett. And, well, this episode ended up running a lot longer than we thought it would, and the audio was just... The raw audio for the entire episode came just under 3 hours. We decided that was too long for a single episode, so we decided to have it split into 2 parts. And, yeah, that's his... Wherever Rubbish decided to cut off the episode, this is part 1, and we'll see you again in part 2.